Good evening, everyone, to the esteemed panelists. We have Rupa, we have Robin, and we have Rajat, of course. And we welcome all the participants, the attendees who are attending this session virtually. And this is the second session of the day and also of the week, as she has already said it. Our topic for the panel discussion is the unheard voice, the independence of independent directors. During this pandemic, globally, life and business has been disrupted in an unprecedented manner, and all of us are grappling with it. Almost all board meetings today are virtual. In fact, interestingly, some of my board appointments have been virtual and have only attended board meetings virtually. I'm yet to meet any of my board members physically, and I'm looking forward to the day when I can really meet them physically. But it's all virtual right now for the time being. So COVID-19 has not only increased the role of businesses and the government and the regulatory, it has also increased the role, responsibility, and accountability of independent directors by many-fold. And to meet these challenges, let me assure you that the board members are also not far too behind in their responsibility. Today, the board of directors are more engaged in discussion with management on topics which may not have been as prominently discussed as in the past. For example, your employee health, safety, and staff retention, redundancy plans, as well as digitalization. They are also discussing supply chain realignment, cybersecurity, data privacy, and confidentiality, to name a few of them. Of course, the regular items such as planning, business plans, financial performance review are now being reviewed also, but with a different vigor. In the light of all this, today our discussion is the unheard voice, the independence of independent director brings in a lot of relevance. It would be interesting to learn from my esteemed panelists, whether or not the independent directors are as independent or enjoy the independence as envisaged in the statutes, as well as in the name by itself, as we call ourselves independent directors. So, and since our panelists have got a wealth of experience, and we will go through, we'll have this interactive session, and we will be able to get some thoughts of all our esteemed panelists. Members, we will go through this panelist. If anyone has any questions, those of you who are attending virtually, could you please put your question on the chat, and we shall take them once our panel discussion is over. So to kickstart our conversation, Rupa, I'll go with you. Could you share your experience so far as an independent director, and also not just this, and also as a woman director on the board?
Yeah.
Twofold.
Yeah. Thank you, Shukla. I think this is a wonderful question. I think being an independent director, and I won't go to the woman part of it so soon, has been a very gratifying experience for me. It helps me to contribute really to decision making, which is good decision making in the long-term interests of all the stakeholders. I've heard many people ask me, why do you want to take up independent directorship? Because of the liabilities and the responsibilities are so huge. And I keep thinking to myself, directors were always responsible, right? There was never they always had duties, and they had the duty of care and duty of diligence to go about it. But the only thing that the Companies Act 2013 did was to codify these duties, right? And to make the duties more onerous in a way, because now we are responsible even for all the stakeholders, including the environment. And that is, I think, what makes the job a little bit more tough. But for me, since I have no axe to grind and no personal agenda, I think being an independent director really allows me to give back and help further corporate governance. It's a space, I think, where you meet the best minds, right? You work for a purpose and you find the right ways of doing things. It's about creating a culture of integrity, transparency, values, give back, it's the CSR initiatives, and also the thinking about sustainability. The triple bottom line, it's not just about the profits, it's also about the people and the planet, and it's also about making a difference. So I've been lucky actually to be on the right boards and to be backed by the right teams. I think that is something, and where I felt that the boards were not as good as they seemed to be when I joined them, I took the option to resign from those boards. So I exercised my right in that manner. And I think as a chartered accountant, I had the opportunity to share quite a few of the board committees as well. And that to me has been a great learning experience, because you need to be a good listener. You need to make the right observations. You need to give people a chance to talk. And then the committee members to contribute also. And it's with a common counsel that you reach a decision that is right and in the long-term interests of the company. Coming back to your question about the woman director, I think, yes, far and few, I always get asked the question, as a woman, being alone in the room and sharing a different perspective, is your voice heard at the table? And I'm really very happy to say that, yes, even being alone, and in most of my boards, I am alone on the board, my voice is heard. So I think it's about the trust. It's nothing to do with the woman and the man, but it's about being together and working together. So I think we're all in there for a common objective. So I'm enjoying being an independent director on corporate boards. Back to you.
In fact, I echo what you say. Even I am the lone female independent director on the board. But it's the professionally that has brought us to the table, and that takes us through as well. So I completely echo what you say. So may I request Rajat to share with us, what is your perspective? What has been your experience as an independent director?
Thanks, Shukla, and I'm delighted to be here at this panel today. I started my journey as a board member way back in 2004, but that was in executive director's role as managing director of Walt Disney and then later on Xerox. But I started my independent director roles in 2015. And I've seen this journey, to be full of learning and very enriching for me personally. It has helped me understand the different facets of the board's roles and responsibilities, in particularly, how it is different from executive responsibilities that one had been handling for a long, long time. Clearly, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. You are non-executive. You are playing the role of, supporting compliance and advisory. It clearly comes with some degree of risk and some exposure to liabilities and so on. And, I think that is very important to understand. I've been quite lucky so far to work across different kinds of companies, into consumer products, into media, into financial services. I think overall the experience has not been limited to just contributing to fundamentally the compliance side and the business advisory side, which is really helping and coaching the teams, but learning as well, because these are different sectors and I have not worked in some of these networks. And most importantly, the network that one has built over the last 30 years has been very useful in terms of, connecting the dots, sharing the past experiences, knowledge, the network, probably a little bit of wisdom here and there. The ID role does require you to be responsible to protect the interests of minority shareholders. And I think that's a very, very important part and parcel of that role. I think that takes the top priority when decisions are being taken and so on. And, there are different kinds of companies, promoter-driven companies or widely held companies, or listed or non-listed companies. I don't sit on a listed board yet, but the 4 boards that I sit on are reasonably large or mid-sized, unlisted, public and private entities. So for me, it's a good experience so far. It's not been too long, and I'm still learning and growing in this area. Thanks, Shukla.
Thank you, Rajat. I now request Robin to share his thoughts on his experience.
Yeah, hi, good evening, all of you. Experience as an independent director for me has been a mixed bag.
Oh, wow.
I believe the role of independent directors and the independence of the independent director depends upon the ecosystem which the entrepreneur or the chairperson creates. And if he or she is pro good governance, the independence of independent directors takes place. And if he or she is not, it doesn't work. If the chairperson is not, let's say, pro-independence, does not mean there is poor governance. Both need not go together. To my mind, poor governance is there is a fraud, misdeed, taking advantage of situation. So therefore, I currently sit on three. I'm a full-time responsible as a director in one company and 3 independent directorship, and I sit on 3 listed of the 4. 3 are listed entities. So when I'm saying mixed bag, my view is that the independent directors mostly or many of them are not knowledgeable. They don't know what their rights and responsibilities are. And therefore, the function of the board depends upon if all of them are knowledgeable, are they prepared for the meeting? The dockets may go to everybody 7 days before, but I have noticed hardly anyone even reads through them. So they just come, it's a nice little quarterly meeting, tea, coffee, and in any case now webinar, don't even know whether he is or she there or not, doesn't matter because video may be on, may not be on. So it's to my mind, if the independent director wants to contribute, he or she can. Many does not. It's like little party or little income. So the ecosystem is still, to my mind, not as strong as what we believe it is, but it all depends upon who the independent directors are. And if they want to make a good job of it, they can. I think the system is good enough, robust enough to contribute, and the system is weak enough also to enable the independent directors get away, not work or not contribute.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Robin and Rajat, for your thing. My experience to share with all of you that I'm on 4 boards and 3 of them are listed. I mean, I've been always on as an executive board member since maybe 2 decades now, but last 2 years I'm now on 3 listed companies, just joined another board, which is due to be listed. So I completely share with what Robin says that, many a times you'd find that while the deck is sent, and no matter how voluminous it, some of us who are from the corporate world and who've been there, at least I would read through every single line and, try and get as much of clarification I need. Yes, completely agree that there are often independent directors who may not have any input whatsoever. However, the system is such that, if you are in your capacity as an independent director, if you would like to voice something, you have complete independence to do so. And the choice is yours, because SEBI has now come back, that, and I think boards are also conscious of the fact that if independent director resigns, there's a reason to give reason as to why the person has resigned. There's a lot of red flag that gets raised, may or may not at some point in time. So thanks. So next question will be that we all discuss what's the role of an independent director. This pandemic since last year, May onward, I think till about Feb, we may have all had physical meetings and but this pandemic has actually disrupted the entire business. I mean, some companies have been very majorly impacted. Some have been not so impacted, and some may not have been impacted, especially those in the essential service may not. So in your view, Rajat, I'd go with you first. In your view, how do you think this pandemic has impacted the role of independent directors? Rajat, you're on mute possibly. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So Shukla, clearly, pandemic has disrupted a lot of, ways of working that we see. And it also in the ways independent directors can deliver the roles effectively, I think it has made a significant impact. Clearly, it has led to virtualization of things, including board meetings, recruitment and selection, evaluation. I got recruited onto a board, like you said, in the beginning, completely virtually, and I haven't even traveled and haven't even met the fellow directors. So while on the one hand, virtualization has its positives, which we all understand in terms of cost and savings and time efficiencies, it does have its downsides. I believe the personal touch, is not there. I think chemistry and interactions with the management teams, which could lead to ITs getting more in-depth understanding of what's happening on the company, off-agenda discussions have reduced drastically. Spending face time with other directors, was a very valuable part of building that whole camaraderie or chemistry and understanding between each other which is almost gone missing right now. So now you have to formally set up meetings, with an agenda in mind, which is pretty much cut to cut. So I think we miss out on that social and non-verbal part of the meeting, which plays a very important role. Having worked for 30 years in sales and marketing and seen the element of touch and feel, I think it's important over time to build that hybrid model where some meetings will be face-to-face and some may happen over VCs to keep the efficiency. And hopefully future will allow for that. So pandemic has made its impact for sure.
Thank you. Ram, may I request your views on this? How has the pandemic impacted the role of an ID? Or if at all it has impacted?
Yes, in my personal opinion, or view or experience, it has majorly impacted. One word which I would like to summarize the pandemic period is innovation. The companies which have been able to innovate and change themselves, adapt to the new norm, survived and flourished. I have two personal experiences. One company, which was an unlisted company, during the pandemic, we realized the market is heating up. And that's the time we advised that why don't you access the market? And one of the company did a fantastic IPO. It's in the public domain, got oversubscribed 100 times and raised good money. So to my mind, the pandemic gave an opportunity to suggest that they can actually capitalize on their so-called value of the business. There is another company, again, it's a listed company, of which I sit there, is they had serious financial difficulties. It's an FMCG company. And the consumptions went down because the shops were closed. Many of the shops there and malls were closed. And therefore, a lot of work had to be done on financial re-engineering, not going to the market to raise money, which the other company did. This is actually to save cost. So the pandemic, I think, changed the way businesses are dealt with, handled and looked for and looked after. And two personal experiences definitely shows that the one word which worked extremely well was innovation. So yeah, that's what I think we will have to keep doing, because this pandemic bhoot or the ghost is not going to go away very soon. Thank you, Shukla.
Thank you. That's a great input. I agree with Rajat about the fact that, the meet and feel factor is very important. A lot of discussions happen during your informal meetings and stuff like that. And the body language also, communication, you may be messaging something, doesn't get the risk of misinterpretation is to a large extent reduced, So Rupa, your thoughts on this aspect?
Yeah. I think I'd agree. Innovation is a great word, and that is something that we've really learned from the pandemic. But yes, the pandemic has really taught us a lot, I think. It was unprecedented and it really brought the whole world to a standstill. And while it was good for the planet, it put most of us in a difficult situation, right? I think the first response was to think about the health and safety of the staff and their family members, and also to think about the unorganized workers and, the problems that they had because they were sitting at home and because of the lockdown, they lost their livelihoods. It was time to think about how you could contribute and what you could do for them, right? Whether it was distribution of grain kits or whether it was the oxygen concentrators and the ventilators in the second wave, or whether it was just vaccination drives. I mean, there was so much that we needed to do. And in one of my companies, we started a Breathe India campaign where even employees and other vendors and partners contributed to help those in need, which I thought was wonderful. With the lockdown, again, supply chains got disrupted. Demand was a complete zero in the retail space. And with work from home, you needed really a lot of IT infrastructure, which was something that you needed to put your mind into. VPN connectivity and all that was something that we didn't really think about so much. We were forced to really think about it. Cybersecurity was a big concern, and ransomware attacks were also forced you to recheck your IT security systems. Liquidity was a big issue, and bank lines were frozen. There were instances when mutual funds wanted prepayments, credit costs were rising, and capital was scarce. So it was difficult times. Keeping the staff together and motivated was also important. And it was important to give them the right signals And we saw staff really volunteering to take pay cuts and go without bonuses. That was a year when we did all that. The board and committees had to meet more often. Video conferencing was a norm, actually. Sustainability issues came to the front, and that was most important. Business strategies needed to be looked at. Auditors had to readjust themselves to auditing around the computer, and regulators and the government agencies also had to swiftly change their policies. It was a time of chaos, but I think we learned how to swim, right? The IDs were more involved in the operations and in the decision making that needed a quick response to the pandemic. And I think their resilience and agility, these two things mattered the most, was the need of the hour. We have now learned to see risks in a different perspective, and real-time risk assessment is now instead. What if scenarios and making it a practice to think about what can go wrong. I think that is the new normal. So I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. It has brought about opportunities, and we have seen capital raise, etc. But yes, it has taught us a lot, and we need to keep thinking of what else can happen. So that's.
Thank you, Rupa. I think I completely agree with all of the words, innovation, resilience, agility, and all the challenges the board has been facing, and then stepping themselves up to the need of the hour and stuff like that. Along with it, there are organizations where I'm on the board where we have operation. It was under the essential services staff. So operation was on. Then we had to make sure that the existing staff members who were coming on duty, even some plant operations were happening, how are they being taken up? So that also became truly enough a real concern area, which under normal circumstances, I don't think the board would ponder over it for even a minute. And normally would expect the company to take. But here the board members were taking personalized interest to understand what it is. So now we move to the next one. Now I'll come to Robin with this. Robin, how in your view are organization and regulators viewing the role of independent directors? While we can contribute, we can do a lot of things, it's also important for us to know what, in your perception, is the organizations and the regulators viewing the role.
Good question. Again, a mixed bag. And the point to be made best is to give some examples. Examples available in the public domain and names which are already available in the public domain. A few days back, you must have heard, many of you would have seen the news item, that in the Vedanta board meeting, when the independent directors were being voted, the ex-SEBI chairman, Mr. UK Sinha, who was getting reappointed as an independent director, was voted down. The financial investors, almost all of them, voted against him. Now, what happened? Such was the independent directorship. 65% of the Vedanta group is owned by one family. They voted him in. So 65% voted him in, and the balance of the financial investors, 100% of them voted him out. And outcome, Mr. UK Sinha is back in the board as an independent director in Vedanta Group. Now, what do you make out of it? Is the system working? Is the system not working? And more importantly, why I give this example, there are hundreds and thousands of examples, ladies and gentlemen, but he's an ex-SEBI chairman who stands for good governance. He has been contacted by many people, including investors and the press, and he's non-communicable as I'm speaking to you. This is ground reality. Let me give you another example. Kingfisher, the biggest, to my mind, bloated situation on poor governance. Kingfisher, the last flight of Kingfisher Airlines took place on June 2012. And everything which should have gone wrong had gone wrong in that organization. It's all in the public domain. Who was in the board of Kingfisher? Not only was Mr. Vijay Amritraj, perhaps one of the biggest and the greatest name of an Indian sports person, but the one of the board members was Mr. G.N. Bajpai, ex-SEBI chairman. What was he doing when all this was going on? I'll leave it to you, ladies and gentlemen, for the independent directors board. ILFS, a recent disaster. It had a 15-member team, and all disasters took place, and it's in the public domain again, that they actually borrowed short to lend long, apart from any other things which they have done. But that was a basic concept. They borrowed short to lend long. Who was the independent directors? Central Bank of India had an independent director there. State Bank of India had an independent director there. Abu Dhabi Investment Bank had an independent director there. And Oryx Corporation, a Japanese financial institution, which actually runs the Oryx car, had 2 independent directors there. Now, with all these independent directors, why did ILFS do what they did? So, to answer the question, Shukla, the only way I could make this point is to give you some examples, so that we can realize whether this ecosystem of independent directors is working. As I said a little earlier, it works, provided the chairperson or the family who runs or the entrepreneur or the majority of the board members believe that good governance, running it well, giving independence to independent directors works. But unfortunately, some of the examples which I've just given you proves otherwise. So it's a mixed bag, as I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. You really put us back into memory lane and thinking of us, all of us, all that we've been through. And I think these are the cases which has also caused a lot of concern, including the age-old Satyam case, which has actually caused a lot of concern to people who really want to become independent directors, to see whether or not, what is the risk appetite and what are the roles and responsibilities that they're really taking upon themselves. So I'll come to you, Rajat, now. It's the same question, which I think you dropped off for a little while, so I'll just repeat it. How in your view are organization and regulators viewing the role of independent directors?
So, Shukla, yeah, I think let's talk about organizations first. I mean, generally, to me, organizations first want to meet their own compliance norms, as per company law, which is 1/3 of the board or half of the board, depending on who the chairman is. Whichever bracket they fall in, they want to ensure their view. I mean, the whole view is, how do I meet the law first? Right? That's my experience, at least. And I think then they expect the IDs to support, obviously, the compliance procedures and so on. Again, different organizations view differently. Let's take bulk of India, which is promoter-driven organizations, right? Otherwise, the widely held and there are, of course, listed companies, widely held companies, MNCs and so on. But let's talk about promoter-driven organizations, which is perhaps the broader theme also of the subject. So in that aspect, while IDs are expected to support compliance and have oversight on financials and stuff like that, there are a few of them who are the progressive ones who would like to seek strategic advice. But I think most promoter-driven companies do not expect or seek such advice. At least that's what I've seen. I remember, a chair of a large board once said to a new incoming independent director, please keep giving your inputs and ideas to the board, but treat them like Christmas gifts. If the recipient likes them, they use it, else they just stock it up in the cupboards to use it later or pass it on. Don't become emotional about getting those ideas executed. So I think that's how most organizations would view independent directors. I think regulators obviously view them as harbingers of corporate governance, the ones who will protect minority shareholder interest and all of the things that they have created this institution for. And they've been trying to tinker and evolve the framework over the last several years, whether it's appointment, whether it's eligibility, remuneration, resignation, with the most recent change also having happened just a few months ago. But I think to Robin's point, the design of this institution of ID is not built to deliver on these expectations. I think this institution fundamentally is not strong enough because of the inherent process of the appointment itself. And there is very little regulation around appointment. Just about anybody can be appointed an independent director, if you fulfill some basic criteria. And you are appointed by the promoter to protect the minority interests, shareholder interest from the promoter. So I think there is some paradox there also, which I think one should sort of look at. So to me, corporate governance is ultimately not a matter of regulation. I think it has to be in the DNA of the promoter.
Completely agree with you, So I'll now come to Rupa. Rupa, you could share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, Actually, I can quite agree with what Rajat and Robin have been saying, but I think, and also independence is like a state of the mind, right? Regulators can do only that much, but they can't really ensure independence, right? It depends upon the individual and the commitment to the role, right, of the independent director. I think regulations just ensure that there is no conflict of interest, that they protect us with DNO insurance, etc., and decriminalization of some offenses. That said, the new regulations that are proposed by SEBI, which take effect from Jan 1, 2022, like a majority of the minority board for the appointment of IDs, the stress on the composition of the NRC, the mode and the procedure specified for appointment of independent directors, the composition of the audit committee requiring related party transactions to be approved only by independent directors, all these things, and DNO insurance policy, I don't know why it's restricted only to the top 1,000 listed companies. It should be for everyone. That said, all these are processes, and I think thought processes which make you feel that no, the regulator is thinking about your safeguarding your interests, right? So that's a step in the right direction. They're all indicators that the regulators feel independent directors are important and want them to maintain their independence. Apart from that, I think institutions like the Institute of Corporate Affairs and the Institute of Directors, they're also a great support, right? The data bank of independent directors that is available to new aspirants, to get onto corporate boards, and also for companies to look at matching skill sets. I think something that is very, very good. And now at least we will not hear the feedback that we can't find the women directors. So at least there we will be saved. And the sessions that both IICA and IOD have, on corporate governance, where they have really doyens of corporate governance come and address us, I think those learnings are really not to be missed. And I think at the end of the day, continuous learning and knowing what the landscape is all about and your duties and responsibilities will only help you further the independence. So as far as I think the regulators really view us as doing an important role, we must live up to that.
What about the organizations? Do you think the organization also look at independent directors in the same light?
I think now they are forced to look at us in a different light. That's thanks to the regulation as well. And plus, if they do understand that you're bringing some wisdom to the table, then they will trust you, and therefore they will treat you with the respect that you deserve. So I think that is important. And it's up to you whether you show your independence, right? You have the spine to speak up, then that's fine. Then you can do it. And they will respect you if you bring in valuable inputs, right? If you're just going to speak for the heck of it, it's not going to matter at all. So it's a matter of give and take, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very important that the organization appreciates and recognizes good corporate governance. Only then the voice that we as independent directors bring on the table. And of course, it's also individually driven. If you want to keep silent and just speak for the heck of it, then you don't get the thing. But if the board, the promoter driven or the board understands that you're making some contribution, they definitely will. You may make them sit up the seat and recognize it. So on the same thing, I'll just come back to you on this. I think Rajat has already spoken on the promoter-driven organization. So what, in your views, as a promoter-driven organization, how is their perception of ID changing? What do you find there? Do you find any change in them?
Yeah. As far as promoters are concerned, I think they view independent directors as someone who can bring value or add value to the table, right? They want somebody who is good and who can help them with networking, who can provide comfort to investors, who can give comfort to rating agencies. They don't want roadblocks and they don't want bureaucracy, right? They just don't want that. They want people with a good reputation who understand their business and who understand their risks and can help them mitigate them. So people who have the time also, because now I think, and people whom they can trust. So I think that's what they want. And like I said before, it's a two-way street. Like if promoters find value add in the inputs of the independent director, they will respect them. And when you build that respect and that trust, then the evaluations also show that the promoter values you. Yeah. So I think that is important. And I think that independence is a liberty that we have to say no to something that we don't agree with, but we should not be reckless about it. We have to also put in liberty, I think, is not license. We have to put in our time, we have to be committed, we have to understand the business, we have to talk with the team, we have to understand the proposals that are put up. The idea is not just to negate everything that is put up, it is to challenge the assumptions, right? To challenge, be satisfied with the risks that they're taken care of and that the proposals are in the best interests. This reminds me of an incident actually, we had, the promoters had proposed to exit from a business that they just started 2 years ago. And we challenged the proposal and we said, okay, let us know what were the assumptions when you started it, what makes them now invalid, and why is it that we need to continue, discontinue this business? And can the capital be redeployed more effectively elsewhere? And when we got all the answers and we were convinced with it, we actually agreed to it. And I think that was, on hindsight, I feel that the agility of the promoters and the team was commendable. We sold off the business and along with the people, and it was a fair deal. And I think that is what matters the most. So promoters really expect you to stand up and to understand where they're coming from, and also give in inputs that will help strengthen the governance and give an independent perspective to the risks that they're taking, right? So that's what.
Robin, your thought on this aspect of the promoters, independent promoters?
Mixed bag, of course. Mixed bag.
We wait to look forward to hear it.
There are good promoters, not too good promoters. I've already given some examples. There are good boards, not too good boards.
Yeah.
And so it depends. And by the way, the most promoters are trying to see the independent directors more or less agreeing to what he or she is trying to do. It's not that you challenge and then really put a roadblock and then say, please write my dissenting note and that will be part of the minutes. That's not, from the outside, that's what it looks to be, but from the inside, that's not the way to proceed. It doesn't work that way. In most of the boards, it doesn't work. You can put 1 or 2 dissent votes, but I can tell you most of the time, then your days in that board would get numbered, irrespective of the legal position as the situation is. You shall get phone calls. The board might move a no confidence motion against you. Very little one can do in spite of all that it is said, that you have to write down your resignation letter, put it in the public domain. That's what is going to happen soon. But I don't think it's still is good enough for the ecosystem to change. The point of the matter is, if for any reason one of us gets into a board which is not a good board, of course, we should try to make it a good board. Rather than protesting, it doesn't work, but we can work together. The fact that the board has taken you or the chairperson has taken you, there was some expectation from your side. So I think it is good to protest from inside and make it change rather than resign and go out and say, oh, I resign and it's all gone. So I always believe that maybe we could make a change because we are different. All of us are knowledgeable. We understand what good governance is. If we can't make a board change by writing newspapers or sending WhatsApp messages, we can't change boards. So we might as well do it from inside. And I believe we can still do it from inside, provided we have a positive attitude and we believe that, yes, I am a harbinger to change. So yes, it's a mixed bag, good and bad, but that's how life is anyway. Thank you, Shikla.
Yeah, I completely agree. Incidentally, I'm in most of the promoter-driven boards, and it is amazing to see how much of value they give to corporate. And I've always been a corporate lawyer, in-house lawyer, and there you're so regimented, and you make sure, being head of legal and head of the function, you're driving a lot of processes, bang on, you do it, and that's how it goes. But when you are independent data sitting on this promoter board, it's amazing to see that how one has to steer oneself, mediate oneself, bring forth. I completely agree with you, Robin, that there's no point in going out of the board, resigning, and then writing WhatsApp message and doing side conversation. And completely agree with Rajat and Rupa also that when you give these points, if there is merit in what you state, and there's a way to talk about it and not very in a hostile manner, points are accepted, and they are open. And I think my experience with promoter-driven organization, in fact, I just had a call this morning also, they are far more, the commenter have been asked that, please come and tell us what else do we need to do, and being part of the corporate governance and all the processes and stuff like that, it is there. Yes, I agree with you, Robin, that it is not the same everywhere. You'll have a mixed bag of promoter-driven organization, but I'm sure, organization who would like to see business continuity, long-term sustainability will definitely work towards adoption of good corporate governance. So as another last question that I would thought, before we close our session today, that, we know that there are a lot of aspiring people who want to become independent directors, and some people have called me up and stuff like that, I just wanted to know, I wanted to get one thought from each one of you as to what would be your message to these aspiring aspirants, what is it what comes to your mind first thing? How would you like to advise them? What do they need to do? I'll go with you, Robin, then first.
To all my aspiring friends who wants to become independent director, I know many of them do. Networking is very important. Someone has to call you. You see, independent directors are not appointed by an application. There is no job offer, there is no vacancy, and you don't apply for it. Essentially, you will get a call. Someone will say, hey, hello, would you like to join my board? I would love to have you. This is how it works. And if that is how it works, it's all a matter of networking. And the second issue is you need to depict always a positive attitude. The negativity on yourself, no entrepreneur likes a negative person. They want a positive person. Obviously, they want someone who is knowledgeable, knows the business in totality, but positive attitude and networking, if you do these two, chances are that you shall be in a board very soon. That's my advice.
Thank you. Rajat, your thoughts?
So, as Robin says, once you have networked, hopefully you'll get calls. And once you get calls, I would only advise that, you should choose your companies carefully. Because having said all that we have said, there are good boards and there are not so good boards. And there are multiple examples in public domain where things have gone wrong. So I think choose your companies carefully, where you can both contribute and also learn, because you need to develop yourself into, a strong ID, and necessarily have the courage and conviction to speak your mind, because, independence of independent directors is really the conversation here. And I think without that role is got very little meaning in my mind. So I think be careful. I've made some mistakes, like I think Rupa said, you join a board and then you quickly leave it when you see what goes on in a board meeting. And you say, my God, I shouldn't be here for too long before you're confirmed in some AGM. So I think you should do your diligence before you join a board. But yes, to get the calls, you must network. Totally.
Rupa, your thoughts?
Couldn't agree more with both my co-panelists, Robin and Rajat. Just one thing, I think we must not shy away from independent directorships. Exercise caution, as Rajat said. Choose your boards carefully, be committed, and make sure you listen to everyone. You ask the right questions and then voice your opinion. Have the humility to agree and change your opinion if that is in the best interest of all the stakeholders for the long term. I think that is what is most important, that humility and being ready to change if you think that others are talking more sense than you understand. So I think that is something that we must do. Don't just stick to your opinion because, you're so fervent about it.
So just one question. Now, we have Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs having a data bank and all this registration happening. You just said the women directors. I know a lot of female women directors who really want to come on the board, and they are also grappling with it. So how do we go about it, And if networking is all that's going to really get, and that's actually the reality, that's a ground reality, whether we accept it or not, that's a different thing, but it is a ground reality. So how many of people do you think get sourced from these data banks?
I don't think too many.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on that data bank forever, and I've never got a single call.
Maybe with the
Shukla, I'm in the board of Indian Institute of Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, who maintains the directory. As I am noticing in the last few months, people are asking for this directory. They are looking at it, but they are looking for people's name whom they want to be there. So again, networking is number one, director is number two. So let's not reverse the situation.
So
I mean, I really think the process of appointment, that is where the key is. The directors, at least, I mean, we've talked about progressive organizations, a mixed bag, good and not so good. But the question is, in the large Indian landscape with N,000 companies, what is it the right kind of boards, or is it just friendly directors on boards which get, appointed by referencing and like friends and neighbors or retired bureaucrats or whatever? At least that's what I see in a lot of places. If you leave aside the well-managed, professional, widely held, high corporate governance kind of environments, I would say the bulk of the Indian boards still have a lot of people who are, I would call, friendly directors. That's what I think. So therefore, I think, to the point, you got to be friendly to someone, right?
But there's also another factor is that, a lot of companies are engaging recruitment agencies to identify independent directors for them.
So you're right. You're right. But I think when you look at numbers, you talk to Spencer, talk to Egon, if there are
fewer.
I mean, what's the percentage of directors appointed through a headhunting firm? Versus what's the percentage of directors appointed through a friendly, comfortable, non-roadblock? Because it's easy to appoint somebody. It's not so easy to sack him. Really, if you're in the promoter shoes, you don't want somebody who's going to be a, problem child to handle.
True.
Of course, you want intelligence, you want all the good skills, but you still somewhere, at least I think, you want that alignment.
Definitely. Definitely.
तो वो challenge है. I mean, fundamental challenge तो मुझे लगता that challenge still continues to exist in my mind as to the the real paradox of independence.
I recently heard from I was talking to one of the big fours, on the appointment of independent directors and the trending and the stuff. And what he was telling me that very soon there's going to be a huge glut, because those directors who've been appointed way back in, I think 10 years will get completed next year.
No.
So they will have completed 2 terms. So one would expect that there would be another few, there would be next demand for good independent directors. So I think one of the messaging could be networking, positive attitude, and all that Rupa and Rajat and everyone has said. I think aspiring independent directors need to start working on themselves and primarily work on your network, because if as Robin said, the list is there, while people are asking for the list, but they're looking for the names who they have already sort of in their mind. Yeah, Rajat, you were saying something, sorry?
No, I was just saying that I think, it'll be a good idea to even look at appointment criteria. For example, there is no age criteria. There are independent directors who are 95 years old today, right? And there are independent directors who are 23 years old. I mean, there has to be some philosophy around what do you expect, and can you get that expectation from a 23-year-old and a 95-year-old guy? I mean, I don't know. And I don't know if there is an answer here, but certainly the appointment criteria are wide open.
True. I think we have a few more minutes. If anybody would like to add anything more.
Do we expect any questions from people? I mean, there are.
I don't find any questions on the chat. Just a moment. Let me just check. No, there's no question on the chat. So I think.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Actually, we must have spoken so well.
That's what I'm saying. That's absolutely clean panel.
The clarity is 100%.
With
and all the questions which they could have asked, they have asked. But my submission, if I may be given an opportunity to speak for just a few seconds, that there is a lot of doubt in people's mind that independent directorship is not nature, because there is a lot of burden. You may get into some legal trouble. But my submission is it's not true. It is not true. The independent directors are definitely protected as long as the independent director is not directly involved in frauds. That is important, and there is enough protection under law. And if you look at the recent past, so many arrests have taken place, so many. Hundreds of entrepreneurs have been taken behind bars but see how many independent directors have been taken. I think I have noticed two. And if you go a little deeper into it, those two characters who have been independent directors and have been arrested, you will find they were directly responsible for the cause. So I am quite personally, I feel all those who would be watching now or perhaps will watch later, independent directorship is a good thing to have. Do not worry if you are not directly complicit with any fraud. And it's a great experience. Of course, it will give you some money too. It's a great experience. So please do aspire, keep networking, hold positive attitude. I'm quite sure you shall be there. Your dream shall come true.
Well, that's very aspirational, and I'm sure somebody will pick it up from here. Rupa, would you like to add something last sentence?
No, I think that's absolutely true, and that there's no reason to fear independent directorship. It is a great learning experience, and I think we must take it on. And I think this is a way that you can give back and contribute as well, right? Because you've learned so much over the years. It's now time to give back and make use of that learning and improve corporate governance. And I think we're moving from here to more important things like climate change and sustainability and things. So as many minds as we get that work well should be there. I agree completely.
I'm sure this is Rajat. Anything you would like to say?
No, I think my fellow panelists have captured it all. But the bottom line is that I think it's an enriching experience, and at some stage in life, it's just gives you this whole wide platform to contribute. So I think it's a good thing, and people should really look forward to that. And with Robin's statement about the risk being very, very controlled, I think that's a very, very positive thing that I'm hearing. That it's not as risky as one might have thought it is, and as long as you're doing your duties properly, you are well protected. So I think and if you get paid some whatever stipend or little bit, it's not bad at all.
Stipend, I quite like the word you use, stipend.
Because that's how we started early days, na stipend. Ab sab khatam karne ke baad, it is also still stipend only. Robin knows in Hindustan Lever what stipend used to mean.
Okay, members. Rupa, Robin, Rajat, thank you so much. I think we've really truly lived up to the name, that the unheard voice of independence of independent director. And it was great to moderate this panel. Thank you so much. And
so kind of you. Shukla, you did a wonderful job.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.